It's Thursday, it's 8 o'clock, and you're at the Forum. The next 1.5 hours we're going to sit and discuss and debate the hot topics of the last 7 days. Do please keep in contact with us. It's a kind of question time with sporting attitude. So on the screen you'll see how to contact us by Skype, Twitter, at Sports Tonight TV. And I have 3 wise men with me tonight. They didn't come bearing gifts, but they do come loaded with opinion. Malcolm Clark, from the chair of the Football Supporters Federation. You're very welcome. Tell me, you are chair, but you also have a chair or a seat at the table, which I believe is the FA Council. That's the first time a football supporter's ever had that, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm the supporters rep on the FA Council, but that makes me one of 118, so it's actually quite a big table.
I remember they taught me at business school, a quorum of more than 7 is difficult to get a decision. How do you get a decision out of 118 people around a table? Presumably they're not all around a table at the same time.
Well, sometimes we have problems, but all I can do is make sure that the supporters' voice is heard, and I try to do that to the best of my ability. So Charlie Sale in the Daily Mail constantly describes me as making long-winded rants.
Well, you've got 90 minutes.
I think our members would be quite happy to know I'm doing that.
You've got a good platform for 90 minutes to rant away tonight.
Excellent, yes.
The inimitable Dave Bassett, I've known you for a very long time. Now, I've got to try and get this right because I Wikipedia'd you last night. Barnsley, Watford, Southampton, Sheffield United, Leeds United. I'm missing a couple.
Leicester, Nottingham Forest, Wimbledon and Watford.
More clubs than Tiger Woods.
That's right.
Lots to say. Well, I know you've got lots to say because I've seen you with lots to say over the years, and I know the audience are going to be very appreciative of your views tonight.
Thank you.
So you're very welcome. And Patrick Barclay, now of the Evening Standard. Now, I know you're one of the wise men because I've known you since God was a little boy. Formerly of the THAMES,
Yes.
Independent.
Yeah, Independent.
Way back.
Telegraph, Guardian, Guardian. Probably when we first met, I was on the Guardian. I've been kicked out of more jobs than Harry's been engaged in.
But you've also been very opinionated on a number of issues and led the front in the sports world. So I know you're going to enjoy this tonight. We have a question coming in from a gentleman called Simeon. Simeon, hello. Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Good evening.
You're a Spurs fan, Simeon?
I am a Spurs fan.
Okay, how do you feel?
How do I feel?
Yeah, 4th. Does that matter at the moment?
Yeah, no, after the points that we were ahead, back, I think it was 13 points at the end of January, I'm obviously disappointed that we're now behind Arsenal.
It's going to be a very exciting running between you and Arsenal. Anyway, let's have your question to the 3 wise men I've got sitting with me.
Good evening, fellas. Yeah, my question basically is, after Saturday's events at White Hart Lane with Fabrice, all fans got really, well, the Spurs fans and Bolton fans got great press by the way that they behaved at the ground. Do you now think that around all grounds, that behaviour between different supporters will improve, respect to each other's and also to the players that are playing on the pitch?
Malcolm, you're the supporter spokesman tonight.
Yeah, well, obviously Saturday's event was an extremely unusual one, as well as obviously an extremely serious one, and I would imagine that many of the supporters there feared that they were seeing an event that was much more serious than it eventually, thankfully, turned out to be. Fortunately, it is very rare, but in my experience, even with slightly less serious events, when players are carried off on the stretcher, normally both sides applaud as well. So I think we're in danger slightly of over-exaggerating the problem. The behaviour generally in football grounds is far, far better than it was 20 years ago anyway. So.
Paddy, you've followed it for years and years, and you've seen the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, that is fair to say, and I've seen some of the most hideous episodes in the game. It was nothing to do with behaviour, but Hillsborough, and of course we all, either in person or in through television, saw Hazel and so on. I mean, and Malcolm's quite right to say that by and large, when something serious takes place, football fans respond. Even before the misfortune that befell Fabrice Muamba, and thank God, now appears to be he now appears
Certainly
to be
making
over the
improvements,
worst.
yeah.
Some of the accounts are really quite encouraging over the last 36 hours. But even before that, there was the tragic, completely unconnected case of Gary Speed, and I thought that the way the football family as a whole, when Sepp Blatter uses the phrase the football family, you tend to sort of smile
Do you think that
sardonically.
exists? Do you feel part
But
of the football family?
I have done, I was very proud to be part of football when I saw the response at some of Gary Speed's former clubs when his widow went there, for example, and his 2 boys and his father. And it must have been very, at a time when they needed all the help they could get. Football fans went to quite ingenious lengths, like having the 11 minutes of applause after 11 minutes of the match because that was Gary's number. I mean, things like that I thought were resourceful and really helpful. And I think that what happened over Fabrice Muamba may have, was
Do you
very
think
much
it's because we're a slightly more caring society than we were in the early days when you and I first entered the professional world of football in the 80s?
I don't know about that because there is the other side as well. There are the odious chants about Manchester United and so on, which must be balanced against it. But by and large, I think that recently...
I want to pick that up, by the way, with you, Dave, because Paddy says about odious chants. Now, you've stood in the dugout, you've been intrinsically involved in the game, and you must hear things. And we always, as supporters, people always wonder, does that matter? Does he react to that? Does he hear that? Or are you so focused on the game? Do you hear some of the stuff that goes on from the crowd when you're managing?
You don't. I didn't personally, because you were concentrating on what you were doing. I mean, there would be the odd chant that you'd hear, but quite honestly, you sort of close your ears to it because it's insignificant to you at that moment. You can't change anything, and you sort of accept when you go away from home, the away fans, the home fans are going to be aggressive and behind their team. They're going to shout for every foul, every handball's in their favour, because that is the way they are. They become biased, and all fans are like that. They see through one eyes that their team is there, and that was come. So I think when we go back to it, to actually play, you're not going to find that the football family is going to be together. There's still going to be the players, the fans still crying and shouting out if the ref gives a free kick against them that they don't think, and etc. I think there's going to be that competition. But of course, when something comes that's seriously happens like this, then people common sense kicks in somewhere along the line. You come along, you can't sort of be stupid then. You realise that we're all pulling together and this is something different, But I think when it comes to the team, that if you're a fan of one club, you're with that club. You want them to win. You don't mind how they win.
But you have an empathy with the opposition supporters in a situation like this, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, yes, yeah.
Simeon, is that how you feel? I mean, you were there on Saturday, weren't you? Simeon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You were there on Saturday?
Yeah.
How did you feel being part of that?
I'm proud now of the way that we all behaved, and obviously absolutely delighted that he's pulled through, and amazed at the response from the medical staff. And even yesterday at the Stoke game, I thought Tottenham and Stoke and all round the grounds, everybody did the football family proud by acknowledging and wishing him well in the way.
Did you feel slightly jaded at the start of the game yesterday?
Yeah. I think it was quite a weird atmosphere going to the game. I wasn't totally sure if maybe it was a bit too soon, but I understand the club felt it was the right decision.
I think you would have a bottleneck of fixtures otherwise.
It did feel a bit weird.
So will you take that back with you, Malcolm, as you, I know, discuss supporters' issues with the FA? That must presumably make you feel very gallant when you sit around that big table.
Well, yes. I mean, I think at the end of the day, football supporters are human beings. A lot of what goes on in the football ground is theatre, really, to be honest.
But you get 30,000 people in one arena in any walk of life, and let alone the emotional tribalism that exists in football. And that's one hell of a commonality of emotion.
Yeah, the difficult thing is to try and reach agreement about when the line is crossed, and that's quite difficult. You had reference earlier to chants about Hillsborough, chants about Munich, and I think 95% of people would say that's when the line is crossed. But nevertheless, some people still do engage in that.
Pick up on Hillsborough for a second. There are players that were born in the Liverpool area who still today won't pick up a copy of the Sun newspaper because of that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, as a journalist, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's a very complicated issue, that one. But
You've got at least 30 seconds on it.
All right, there are a lot of... let me just broaden it. There are a lot of things that, as a journalist, that I find that I'm ashamed of. And I think there are quite a few things that have happened over the years that, as a football fan, that I'm ashamed of. But Hillsborough, I can't discuss that in 30 seconds.
It was just, for me, I was just curious. It's such an emotion, and it's lasted, obviously, for a very long time.
Yeah, understand.
Dave, you've been involved in football at all different levels. For you, you're still a fan, I presume. Do you still watch it? As I know you're involved and you see it and you have to professionally commentate on it these days, and sometimes you manage teams through the years. Do you see football still as a fan, and do you behave like a fan still after all these years?
I don't really behave like a fan. Occasionally, you know, I might get a bit carried away when I'm watching a game and sort of, you know, go into a mode. I see something happens, but I'm a football fan. I enjoy watching football. I enjoy watching good games. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of bad games as well, but as a fan, you have to put up with those. You're not going to see all the great games. If you end up, in my opinion, if you've got to support a team through the season and you see 5 or 6 really great games by your team, then be grateful, because you'll then see probably 5 or 6 good performances. Then you'll see some bang average, and then you'll see some very poor performances by your team, and even with the standards that are met. So I actually enjoy football. I enjoy seeing the game. I enjoy the people that are in it, and I think football people come from they're different from rugby people. They're different from other sports people, and every sport has got the type of fan that follows them that are different. They would say they're from football, and I think, you know, people have got this football where, you know, I can understand with fans, you know, that they're with their club, and I think it's tremendous when you've got small clubs, you know, in League Two, your Torquays, your Rochdales, and teams like that.
I've been watching a bit
League
of lower league football, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and even
the wealth
non-league,
of emotion from the supporters.
You know, they go with their team, you know, and I think that's
Well,
fantastic, because the easiest thing in this day and age would be, I'll be a Man City fan, I'll be a Man United, I'll be a Arsenal, I'll be a Chelsea, I'll be a Tottenham. It's easy to jump on the bandwagon, and I can understand some people do that because they want the corporate and everything else.
All I can say about this, and I've got a little bit of insight into this, because journalists constantly get accused of being biased, and we get sort of stake. The unhappy fans, the ones who moan, who accuse you of, I mean, I'm biased towards Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, everybody. I'm biased towards everybody, apparently. And the most sort of vicious diatribes all come from fans of big clubs. Now, I support Dundee, a tiny little club, and I'm happy all the time, win, lose or draw. And I feel genuinely sorry for people who support big clubs, because they're never happy.
We should keep this going, but I'm looking at you because there's so much more I want to say. We will get back to it.
Right.
We have to cut to a commercial break. We've got to earn a little bit of money for the station, so quick cup of tea. See you in a couple of minutes. And welcome back to the forum. Patrick Barclay, Dave Bassett, Brian Clark, Malcolm Clark. Did I say Brian? Yeah. Sorry. Malcolm Clark. I'll say it again. Malcolm Clark, you got it twice now. We have Andy from Manchester calling into the programme. If we can find you, Andy. Are you there, Andy?
Hey, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Just about here. You might have to shout at us. That's right. OK, we got you. You're a Man City fan?
Certainly am, for all my sins.
Happy days today?
Yeah, in a good mood today. Great performance last night, I thought.
I thought it did really well. Tell us what your thoughts are.
Generally on Tevez, I think, you know, some of the fans obviously was booing him last night, but great credit to the rest of the City fans, including myself, because, you know, we drowned the boos out with applause, because you should never boo one of your own. You know, no matter who he is, he might be a a world-class idiot, but he's a world-class footballer, and it has a detrimental effect if you start,
No matter what he's done.
Yeah, well, I'm not a great fan of Tevez for what he's done, but what's the point in booing your own?
Okay, well, Andy, what would you like to ask the panel in front of me?
Yeah, basically, I'd just like to ask you, do you think Tevez should have been allowed, should he have been allowed back into English football? And, do you think it undermines Mancini by him being let back into English football?
Thank you, Andy. Now, Dave, years ago, memories of Van Hooijdonk?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, very similar, because when I was manager of Nottingham Forest, Pierre Van Hooijdonk went on strike, and it caused all major problems. But unfortunately for Forest, the board wasn't strong enough to do what the Manchester City board did, and stood by their manager. I mean, what Tevez did was out of order, and the club were ripe, and he thought he could take them on. He went away, and he lost a lot of money himself. And the situation was, I think, when the transfer window was through, City and Tevez thought he was going to go. It didn't happen. So you then have to resolve it, because he's an asset.
So you're now manager of Manchester City. How do you play that from Christmas onwards?
Well, you've then got to sit down. You've got to realise that Tevez is a problem, and you've got to move him on if you can. The only way you're going to move him on now is to play him or get him back and fit. And I think also Tevez started adding up how much it cost him in wages, and if it carried on, it was going to be a big loss, and he was just going to be playing golf, and he realised he wasn't quite as good as Tiger Woods.
So you wouldn't have any qualms about taking him back? And
well, I think you've got to. I mean, I had problems with Van Hooijdonk and etc. And I've got to say, I didn't handle it as well. But then again, Mancini had the board who were there to support him. So they really put Tevez in his place, in my opinion. They won the battle. Tevez had to come back. And great, they've conducted themselves well. And what's happened is in the best interest of the club, and also Tevez. I'm not sure that it'll go much beyond the summer, because if Tevez does well and comes on and shows he's fit, then there's going to be clubs come in. And I think Mancini and Man City will say cheerio to
they'll
him.
be minded to let
But
him go.
what they've done, it's been an economic situation.
The situation, Paddy, we all know, is that this gentleman is quasi-owned by a consortia of wealthy individuals who make a lot of money out of moving him around, and perhaps don't have, I say perhaps, I'm pretty certain they don't have the football's interest, or the footballer's interest at heart. Now, you have to report on this, and you have to make sense of it, and you have to influence your readers about it.
Yeah.
Where do you sit in all this?
Well, I think that there's a real danger of, I think there's a terrible problem facing, there are two great problems facing the game at the moment, and one is the integrity of results caused by the spread of betting, and the second one is third-party ownership in its various forms. In other words, ownership of a player, in other words, something that gets between the player and the shirt. I mean, that's what football should be about. It should be about you, your flesh and blood, and the shirt you wear. It should be as simple as that. That's what the...
but in the real world,
in
it's
the real
a
world,
job, and people get paid,
like that.
And there is money, and it's a huge entertainment industry.
Well, yes, but I think
that
there are things that FIFA can do to restore sporting values. But that's a broader thing. Given the situation that Manchester City, Roberto Mancini faced, I think that interesting to hear that Harry, who's obviously got greater experience than I have, thinks that they handled it well. I certainly did. The problem is, given the real world,
Paddy, he did say he's never going to play for me again.
Yes, well, then you can change your mind.
But I think
when the player comes back, you can say, okay.
Do you lose face as a manager?
No, because everybody knows if it was down to Roberto Mancini, he wouldn't. But the problem is Tevez is worth £30 million, and that's an investment. So? Well, or 20 million, or 15. He's worth a lot of money.
And
so they can't
they
can't. So all of a sudden, he is a tangible aspect of a company. So you can't just disregard that. You've got to do it. So I'm sure they sat down and said, Roberto, we've supported you. Now you and Tevez have got to, bury the hatchet.
So you can put it, you can bury the hatchet and put it back together.
And it's been both.
How do you feel as a fan? You're the one, partly, you and Rupert Murdoch, paying his wages.
I think the manager has come out of this fairly well. I think that would be the general consensus.
And the board, do you think
I agree with that?
If you were a Man City supporter, would you be saying, I'm proud of my club?
Well, I've never put myself in a position of being a Man City.
You're a Stoke City supporter.
I'm a Stoke supporter, and I'm just hoping that he doesn't make a dramatic comeback in Saturday's game. But I think there are
laws of
issues
gravity
that
says that he will.
Paddy has highlighted about the roles of agents, both the roles of agents and the amount of money that's taken out of the game. That's a separate subject. But it may be that a waterline has been crossed here, as indeed to a lesser extent it may have been with Modric earlier in the season when it looked as though
so you're not
wanted to
offended
force,
by it, you just accept it's part of the...
Well, no, I don't think we accept it. I think it's one of a whole raft of things that needs to be looked at in the game. And I certainly thought, to finish this quickly, a lively line by the commentator when Chelsea were playing the other night, when Terry was on the bench directing things, and the commentator said, the manager's the man in the suit. And you could never have told from the television picture.
Just before I come to you, Paddy, any particular thoughts on what you've heard, Andy?
Well, I think it was evident last night because I was at the game, and when Tevez come on, as well as the boos and then the applause, everybody was like together in the stadium chanting Mancini's name. So I think everybody respects what Mancini has done by shouting his name rather than really cheering Tevez or booing him. They actually sung Mancini's name, and I think the message got across that everybody was backing Mancini over this, and what Tevez has done is bang out of order, but, needs must now. Like Dave said, sorry, I nearly called you Harry then. Like Dave said,
the answers to both,
it doesn't matter how rich we are, we cannot write 20, 25, 30 million pounds off, and the way the owners have backed Mancini has been absolutely a credit to us.
Well, it looks like they've turned a lose into a win-win, Paddy, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Andy makes the point very well, and basically the Man City fans last night voted with their voices, and it was an overwhelming majority for Mancini and the ways the whole thing has been handled. So,
really, if this happens again, Dave, do you see the necessity is for the clubs to stand up?
Definitely. The owners of the club
cannot bow to players' demands in any.
Yeah, they've got to go. The player signs a contract, so his job is to agree to the contract. And if the manager wants him to do certain things, as long as it's all everything within the framework and it's reasonable, which it wasn't unreasonable for Mancini to suggest to Tevez he warms himself up again. Whether he warmed himself up 15 times, he's being paid a lot of money. It's no good sulking. But I think it's been good, and I think players will now think twice about doing it. And but in fairness, Man City did have that strength,
and the financial muscle.
Eventually, they put Tevez into a situation where all of a sudden he now had to play the rest of the summer, play not until the summer.
You're absolutely right.
And
they actually boxed him into a financial corner.
Like his agents would saying, "Listen, we've gone so far, we've lost the bluff.
Yeah.
You've got to go back now."
One quick question: would you have him at Stoke, Malcolm?
Well, I think in footballing terms we could certainly use him, but I don't think
Tony... It was sort of tongue-in-cheek. I just wanted to hear you. I just wanted to hear a football fan's view of it. Yes, of course we'll have him.
Yes, I don't think Tony Pulis is the kind of manager who takes much nonsense from players, actually. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Andy, thank you very much. That was a good question. Jim from Swansea, you're very welcome, my friend. How are you?
Hey guys, how you doing? You all right?
Yeah,
thank you.
Fine, thank you. We're all in good shape. What's your question?
Yeah, well, my question is related to how the English teams have performed in the European competitions this year, and it's sort of on the basis of, that England, English teams have performed very well. Do the panel think that the Premier League is still the greatest league in the world, basically?
Interesting one. Paddy, what do you think? Are we still the supreme league in Europe? Or do we still make the best teams in Europe?
Well, no, we don't have the two best teams in Europe. The two best teams in Europe are, apart from Swansea City, who are just Barcelona in disguise, as far as I can see. Absolute joy to watch.
Yeah,
but the two best teams in Europe are Barcelona and Real Madrid, no question about it. A division almost above the rest. But that doesn't mean that English football is falling behind. It's suddenly lost it. The reason that the English clubs are not strong in Europe is purely individual. It's nothing to do with the strength of our football or otherwise. It's that Manchester United are rebuilding. I mean, you saw it in the Champions League final last season. Man United went there and were given an absolute lesson by Barcelona. I mean, it was a slaughter. Manchester United had, I think, one shot on target and it was a goal. It could have been anything. And I think Ferguson you know, because he is Alex Ferguson, knew even before that game that his team weren't competitive, so he rebuilt.
Is that partly, and this
Yeah.
affects the England performance, in inverted commas, as well? Is that because we play a different type of football
No,
week in, week out
I disagree.
here?
I totally disagree with this analysis that because we play gung-ho football, that we fall behind. I mean, anybody who saw Napoli, for example, or Athletic Bilbao,
It was a bit Route 1.
they attack. You know, I mean, they're very offensive teams, and they attack and defend in a unit, which is what any good team should do, and what the English teams try to do. Yes, the defending will appall people in the English Premier League, but all you have to do is watch La Liga or even Serie A now, and you'll see what George Graham, you know, the old Arsenal would call horrendous defending. But that's the way the game is now, and
Dave,
I don't think
do you agree with that?
I think we could have 3 in the last 8 next season.
Do you think it's just one of those seasons?
Well, I think some of the foreign clubs are catching up. But let's face it, as Patrick said, Barcelona and Real Madrid have got all the best players in the world. How many players from Manchester United are getting there to any of those two teams? How many are Chelsea? How many of them? You tell me. They got Messi up front. They got Ronaldo. They're not going to take. Would they replace him?
We pay the best money in the world. Should we not have
Well,
the
we
best
don't
players in
know.
the
I think
world?
Manchester United and Barcelona, Real Madrid and Barcelona, I suspect, play as much.
I think certainly the tax regime's a lot more kind. Than
Yeah,
ours,
I mean, you
which
just
helps.
saw our Atletico Bilbao destroyed Manchester United. I've never seen a team go to Old Trafford
It was
and do what they
astonishing.
did at Old
It was
Trafford.
astonishing
And they're
performance,
5th in the league. Now, you imagine, I think the top Spanish 6 are better than our 6. And, you know, I think our lower teams are
Technically,
harder. I think,
or just from a coaching
I think
point of view?
technically, in the way they play a new attacking game that's totally foreign to our league, because these teams are very direct, Valencia and everything else when you see them. It's not like when you say back from front, but what they do is they turn the teams round, they turn defences. In England, we play everything
I want
into
to ask
feet.
you a ridiculous question, because the man's a complete icon. Is it that people like Sir Alex Ferguson are becoming of a generation past, and some of the new younger coaches, and I include Jose in that, and Pep obviously, are playing it slightly differently and actually have taken the game on a stage, and we're not there yet?
Well, I think in Spain they have. I don't think in England we have. You know, there's been coaches in England who haven't taken it on the next stage.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But I think
Do you
you're
think
talking
the game in
no,
Europe,
well,
and
Jose,
Spain in particular,
when
has
you've got the
moved
best
on?
players, you know, it makes a bit of difference. I mean, Harry Redknapp talks about having the best players. Well, if you've got the best players, that's great. But when all of a sudden you've got the best players and you meet teams who have got equally as good players, then it comes down to the coaching ability and the tactical nous of everything else. So when all of a sudden you come up against the top countries, not only have they got players that are as good as yours, now it's how good you are at picking their strengths off and their weaknesses.
How did
I think you make. Sorry.
Said you were shaking your head.
Oh, no, I think you're making a good point. I don't think Alex Ferguson, if you take the European performance, and okay, Athletic Bilbao were a particularly good example, but Basel wiped the floor with Man United at Old Trafford and only got a draw. I mean, teams, particularly European teams, but Benfica outplayed Manchester United in Lisbon.
Well, you take Sporting Lisbon, who ain't going to be in there. They've done Manchester City over
Yes,
2 games,
absolutely.
And Manchester City with all those players there. Chelsea have you know, they've managed by the skin of their teeth. If Ashley Cole don't clear that one off the line in Napoli,
absolutely.
it's all over.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to go on about Swansea, but I mean, I think there's been good coaching in the Premier League this season. And Brendan Rodgers, I mean, I honestly, I think they played fabulous
He's done a
stuff.
remarkable
Well, they've played,
job.
they've done well.
Let me just
but what's your missing the point? His manager's done brilliant.
Oh, he
And
has.
Brendan
Pulis,
Rodgers
I
has
just
done
wanted
half.
to bring-
Brendan Rodgers done half a season. Tony Pulis is in his full season.
I wouldn't
Let's
deny
see
that.
if Brendan's
Hello, Dave.
keeping Swansea there in 4 years' time.
1 second, I want to bring Malcolm in a second. From a football, that's all right. You're a delight to listen to. From a football fan point of view, do you enjoy watching European football?
Well, yeah, we've been playing it this season for the first time in a long time, since I was a young man, so we
certainly
certainly
moving the ball around better this
enjoyed
year.
that. There was an assumption in the question, which I don't necessarily accept anyway. It said, are we still the best league in the world? There's lots of different ways of judging what's the best league, and in many ways, if you look at it from the fans' perspective, we're certainly one of the very dearest leagues to watch in the
It's
world.
the best entertainment. I would argue that every
yeah,
week of the
I
year.
think there's always
look at the
been a
results
great-
last night, for instance. And I noticed your column, by the way. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's
come back, Malcolm.
a danger of believing our own hype.
Our own hype, absolutely.
Of saying this.
But you
so-
said in your column tonight in the Evening Standard, it's a joy to watch, isn't it? It's sometimes you don't have to analyse it.
It is. Well, I
It's
mean, I'm
it's a
thinking
joy to watch.
of just one night when we had 4 matches, 3 of them were decided. The outcome was decided, and Malcolm was there at one and wasn't too pleased about it. But the outcome was decided in the
After
last
90
5 minutes.
yes.
Now, there aren't many leagues where 3 out of 4 matches are going to be decided by a team straining every sinew till the last minute, and I think that's the joy of the Premier League. I wouldn't.
Well,
change
usually Real Madrid and Barcelona are 5 up by that stage.
Let me just give you...
Jim, just one second. I'm going to come back to Malcolm in a second. Jim, you've heard what you've heard from these 3 gentlemen. You've watched some fabulous football this year. What do you think about the Premier League and how it's competing?
Well, I think in some cases the Premier League is a great league, the entertainment factor and what it's done. And it is the best league, I think, to be in from that side of things. But I do think I agree with Paddy in many respects that the way in which, I just take a little player like, people talk about the players and the best players. I don't think it's always about the best players. I think it's a lot about the coaching. I do think a bit the English game, the English team didn't learn from the European Championships last year and the World Cup, last year. And I think if you look at a player like Leon Britton, who was in League 4 a few years ago, everyone was saying that the guy hasn't got talent, and yet now he's supposedly the 3rd best midfielder in the country as rated by Premier League managers. And that's a guy that's just been coached and taught football in the right way. So I have a belief that even though the league's the best league in the world, the talent and the way in which the game is played is moving on, and I'm not sure the English clubs are staying with that.
That's
I would
a
take
very,
offence
it's a
to
very
that.
good
Leon
point.
Britton has the 3rd most touches of the ball, not the 3rd managers there. It's what you do with the ball. Sometimes people get...
He was voted by, in the Premier League managers all had a poll, and they said after Yaya Toure and David Silva, he was the one midfielder. He was the one midfielder they wanted in their team.
Well, I'm not sure. I think that might have been the Sun doing their survey. I'm not sure they've got every manager that said that situation. If he's that good, he'd be sold from Swansea this summer, wouldn't he?
Let me come to you. Last word, as a football fan. Do you agree?
Well, let me just give you a slightly different perspective on it. A couple of weeks ago, we played at Chelsea. There were a very low number of Stoke supporters there because it was £47 in the lower tier, £50 in the upper tier. The average age of Premier League supporters is going up. If you ask me which is the best league in the world from a fan's point of view, I'd say the Bundesliga. And there are problems that the game has got to tackle about how it uses its money. And it's in danger of pricing itself out for a lot of ordinary fans.
I think we're probably going to address that in the coming hour.
Fine.
So,
I think also, John, that I think...
I know I cut you off, Dave. Go on, so please.
I'm just saying, I think some of the Premier League sides I mentioned, I think we've been doing well in Europe, and I think they've taken liberties by putting out reserve sides and just weakened sides to beat Bâle and Ajax and things like that.
And it's not been, thank God,
also,
it's not been good enough.
No, you're
absolutely. I mean, they've had a bloody nose, and I think I hope they learn from this.
I think the football fans will echo that sentiment. Gentlemen, that's very good. Thank you very much for that. We've got to go to a commercial break. It's going to be another couple of minutes, and please come back. We'll see you shortly. And you're very welcome back to the forum. Now, no more teas or coffees. Stay with us. We've got Malcolm Clark, Dave Bassett, Patrick Barclay. We've discussed a number of issues in the news this week. And now we have a gentleman called Alex, who's got a very pertinent question for us. Alex, welcome to the forum. Alex. Hello, Alex. Alex, can you hear us? Okay, okay. Let's leave Alex for a moment. Let's just pick up where we were, and the interesting thing, one of the interesting things that we touched on before was the media and how it configures with the strength of our league. Do you think that the Premier League as a product, I know we're moving on a little bit from where we were about whether it's the top of the world rankings or not. Does it need tweaking now? Does it need to continually change? There was a discussion 2 years ago about whether Rangers and Celtic would travel south and the Scottish leagues would reconform. What do you think about that?
I don't think that Rangers or Celtic, or obviously any other club, could travel into the English Premier League now. They would be laughably uncompetitive, I'm sorry to say. Not just Rangers, but even Celtic would be relegated, in my opinion.
How about if there was a Premier League 1 and 2?
Well, they might survive.
We're talking about
Rangers. We
with
don't
the financial
know because they're in a
aspects
special
as they are. The lower leagues may not be able to stay professional. Fully professional.
Yeah, but what in Scotland?
No, here as well.
I mean, here
in
as
England,
well.
I mean.
But I think what would happen, I mean, it was mooted at the weekend that Celtic are seriously considering applying to join League Two, and obviously, in brackets, working their way up. I personally, people keep telling me it's a non-starter. I personally think it's a very good idea and an ideal solution to what has become a dead end for these massive clubs in their own country. Rangers, of course, are a separate situation because
There's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Where do you see Celtic and Rangers as a playing item in our leagues? Where do you think they
Don't
fit?
see it.
Div
Don't
1
see it.
Championship?
No, why? They're not in England.
You
Not-
don't
nor
see
is
it. You
Swansea.
don't see it as a theory,
Nor is
or you
Swansea.
don't see it.
Not in Cardiff, but they've
Yeah.
been all part of the Football League for many years.
Yeah.
I can't see that the clubs are going to vote for it. I mean, what do you do if you're top of the Fleetwood, you're top of the conference, and all of a sudden Celtic are going to come in League Two and you don't get in? The pyramid's there. These clubs have dreams, even if they come up and go back down.
But nothing's forever, Dave.
No, nothing's forever. But
So if the product needs continually changing, and we're in a very competitive global market, and if that's going to bring in more money, and we're going to talk, I'm sure, as the programme goes on about TV rights.
The Premier League might do
that's
that,
a good product switch,
but I don't know whether the chances are. I mean, if you take it to that extent, why don't the next step for me that's more dangerous is that the big clubs clear off with Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and you have a European League of 16 teams, and then you leave all the rest behind. So that if you look at it
They
and
talked
then you
about
set
that
up
at one point
and all the clubs could get together and they could then get rid of the Premier League. They don't have to deal with it.
Very quick answer before we bring back our Skype caller. Would you like to see a slight change in the product? Would you welcome a Rangers and Celtic?
I don't think most supporters would. I agree with Dave. And I think the question is, what is the problem that the sudden introduction of Celtic and Rangers is supposed to solve?
Now, some would say that it's just a continual change of product. I mean, you look at, for instance, the confectionery counter these days. Every product from a Cadbury's Dairy Milk to a Mars bar is evolving and changing. They're putting new product lines alongside them, making them green instead of blue or whatever. It's just the evolution of product, and we are a product.
Well, we don't talk of it really as being a product. We talk as football as being part of the community and part of the tradition of it. I think the problems that the Premier League have got about pricing out fans, sometimes the uncompetitive nature of it, etc., can be solved by the Premier League itself. I mean, one of the biggest problems now we've got is these huge parachute payments, which make it more difficult for clubs to rise up the league. And I know we might talk about that.
So there's still things. There's still work. It's still a work in progress.
But I don't think Rangers and Celtic. I think Rangers have got other problems they need to solve before they think about playing in the English league. Yeah,
Thank you, Malcolm. I think we found Alex again. Have we found you, Alex?
You have found me, yes.
Hello. Well, belatedly, what is your question?
I was going to ask you guys whether you think that the FA needs to reintroduce terracing, because I'm sitting here in Germany and we're all quite smug about everyone looking at the Dortmund Südtribüne and seeing all our fans standing and the choreographies, and we're now in a situation where we as fans in Germany believe that the Premier League is falling behind in terms of atmosphere.
It's very interesting, and I wasn't going to give away. I knew that you were sitting in Germany. I wasn't going to give that away. I was going to bring that one a little bit later when I'd heard some of the answers from the panel. Malcolm, I know we finished on you. I'm coming back to you again. This is right in your bailiwick. Standing?
Well, we have standing, and it's increasing. We played at Liverpool the other week. The whole of the Stoke support stood. even on the Kop for big games, particularly big games, Liverpool fans stand. That creates customer care problems for people who can't stand or don't want to stand, or children. It happens more and more. Lord Taylor's prediction that people would get used to sitting and wouldn't standing, precisely the reverse is happening.
Really?
There are plenty of, you can see it on the television screen yourself every week, and sooner or later common sense has got to prevail. There's plenty of models in Germany, rail seating models that can be adapted for standing or sitting, so they can comply with European regulations.
And you would feel that that would be a positive?
Well, I think it's very interesting that the football industry at the moment is very keen to tell government to keep itself out. And yet in this particular area you've got a government regulation that applies to football. It doesn't apply to rugby, it doesn't apply to horse racing, it doesn't apply to a whole load of other things. It doesn't apply to events in the very same grounds.
There's not as much. I would argue there's not as much tribalism in those areas.
Yeah, but I mean,
could be problematic.
and it's perfectly possible to stand in safety. We played at Crawley in the FA Cup a few weeks ago, Stoke, and the experience of standing there was much nicer than the experience of standing in seated areas. Which
you and I've come back, and I hear absolutely what Malcolm says, and I sat actually. Well, I sat for about 10 minutes of the 90 in a lower seat at a football ground the other week, spent most of the time standing.
Yes.
Maybe it's because my knees are worn out from all the running I've done over the years, but it's not as pleasant an experience as sitting for me. But I understand that I'm not your average fan. And people, you've seen it all.
I hope
Paddy,
we'll
what
go
do you
back
think?
to... I was at Hillsborough, and I came away from Hillsborough saying never again, and however, changed my mind. I mean, Malcolm makes the case on the basis of experience. I was at Dortmund, I've had the privilege of being at Dortmund several times, and I was at a domestic match there last season. And it was, watching the yellow wall, 24,000 people, the Südtribüne that was just being referred to. It's absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful to watch. It makes a lovely noise. Dortmund, to me, is one of the best places in the world to watch football. It's really fantastic, and the yellow wall, has a lot to do with that. And there doesn't appear to be any safety issue there. Times have changed, and I've certainly changed my mind completely. I would love to see it come back. Quite apart from anything else, I think you'd be more comfortable if you knew you were going into a standing area. I hope at the same time that stewarding will become absolutely rigorous in seating areas. That's got to go along with it.
Well, that's very difficult. I mean, even if you go to a concert, everyone stands up at
certain points. But I think they must be made to sit down afterwards. And if the numbers become smaller, in other words, if the area's behind the goal, let's say, or in Tottenham's case, I'm sure they'd have to have a sideways standing area
up on the shelf, yes.
In deference to the shelf, and maybe a mini Kipax at the Etihad. But I think to each club, each club will have its own idea. But let's say if the areas behind the goal were at least partly standing, and if it were safe, and obviously Malcolm wouldn't be advocating it if he were convinced that it
David, seems like a bit of a slam dunk, really. Everyone seems in favour of bringing back standing.
I think standing should be allowed. Obviously you've got to provide seats as well, because you've got to provide for everybody's requirements, haven't you? And what's wrong with having a standing area? You can decide what is the maximum amount of people you have in there, so you've got enough room that,
It might only be the same numbers, It might not lead to a reduction in price, like in Dortmund. You might not be able getting in for €15 like you can in Dortmund, but it can only tend that way, can't it?
Alex, are you still with us? I don't know whether you can you can hear us, Alex. But while we're waiting to reconnect with you, Alex, we've had a tweet in that says German stadiums were planned with standing in mind. Would it be easy to implement in England, English and Scottish grounds?
Well, it's easy. You take the seats out. You take the seats out of the areas.
Is it as simple as that, Malcolm?
Yeah. It will vary from ground to ground. At some grounds, for example, you've got seats which are screwed onto the former terrace areas.
So it's as simple as
so that would be
screw them in and take them out.
At other grounds like our own at the Britannia Stadium, if the club was thinking of filling in the 3 open corners, that would present an opportunity. So you'd have to have a look at it stand by stand, ground by ground.
Okay.
And the bottom line is it would have to comply with the Green Guide, which is what defines what a safe ground is.
Let me get back to Alex a second. Talk to us a minute, Alex, about what happens in Germany, because I guess a lot of the people watching this program tonight won't have had the German experience like you have had.
Yeah, I mean, in Germany, the standing area is one of the things that you grow up with. So, you know, when I went to watch Cologne and Leverkusen, I grew up near Bonn, in Mönchengladbach, so plenty of clubs to go to. Also had the privilege of going to Dortmund, and you sort of grow up with this culture of getting a ticket. Back then, you know, it was still D-marks for me, but I mean, we got in for sort of 6, 7, 8 marks back then, so €4. Now it's still only around €15 to get a standing ticket. So it's very normal for the kids and the teenagers, also the ones who are going to a lot of the away matches, to grow up with this football culture that they are standing, involved in the chants, etc. And I think that's one of the points that you perhaps haven't touched upon yet, is that as, particularly in the Premier League, fans are shifting to become regarded as consumers, the aspect of cheap tickets is very important in the standing area.
Yes, that's
exactly.
That's a very price is a very interesting point. Patrick, I know you've got a view on it.
I think Alex has spoken. It's great to hear that. I completely agree. I think the German attitude to football is very different administratively. I heard a very inspiring chap called Christian Seifert, who's the chief executive of the Bundesliga, at a conference last year, and he made the point. He said, our job is not to win Champions Leagues, because with our finances it's going to be difficult, even for Bayern. Our job is to keep the thing going, and that's what Alex is alluding to. The kids can go to matches, teenagers, you know, in low-paid jobs and so on, can afford to go to matches. Parents can afford to take children. And the whole thing keeps going. And the problem that Malcolm alludes to is obviated.
So is there not a German expectancy to win everything?
Yes, of course there is. But I think Christian's good with
I
words.
understand exactly what you're saying. Gentlemen, thanks. And I'd like to thank you, Alex, as well. That was a very timely question by the reaction that we got. Yeah. We have Jez, I can see you. Hello, Jez.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I've got a couple of questions to ask.
You're very welcome. Fire away, Jez.
Yeah, so we run the biggest independent or unofficial Chelsea fans website. And the question we've got, particularly for Patrick, but Dave as well, was somebody of AVB's experience. You know, he was 33, 34 when he came to Chelsea. Was he doomed to fail from the start? And that's the first question. Was he really doomed? Could he have not made it? But secondly, who do you think would be the best person to fill those shoes now?
Okay, Dave, let me come to you on this, because you've been in that hot seat, you've stood in those shoes. AVB, was it a disaster? Could it ever have succeeded?
I don't think it could have been. I feel sorry for the guy. I think you know, they should never have approached him. He's a young guy. He was relatively inexperienced, although he'd done very well. And he was coming into a club, and his agent, who advised him, should have been telling him, no, don't go.
Actually, I mean, Jose said that.
Yeah,
if you
did he?
remember.
Oh, I didn't know
he said
that.
the same
I
thing.
mean,
He
you know,
actually
I
said
saw a good comment
it'll be
from
good in a year or two's time.
When somebody mentioned Brendan Rodgers, Brendan said, "I'm trying to build my reputation, not
Brilliant.
destroy it."
Yeah.
You know, which is there now. AVB is the same age as Frank Lampard. If you've grown up with them and you'd been in with it, it's a different cup of tea. I was at Wimbledon and I grew up with the players, and I was able to move into that spot because I'd grown with them. AVB didn't. He was coming in, and he's got players who are in the twilight of their careers. They're still good players, but they're not what they were when Josie had them at that particular time. So he came in, and Chelsea obviously needed changing. Now, you know, for me, Abramovich thought, you know, obviously somebody's advised him, but I think it was a disaster waiting to happen. And most of the, you know, managers of my era and people I spoke to, nobody could see it working as a success for him.
Really?
Everybody
so
knew
you
it
said
was
that,
going to end in tears.
You said that from day dot. Did
Yeah,
you?
he's walked away with a shed load of money, and he can sit there quite comfortably if
Good
that's
job
what he
if he
set
can
out
get
to
it.
be. But I think he should never. Chelsea, whoever advised him, Abramovich, to go for this guy, really needs his brains examining, because he wasn't. He needed somebody who was vastly experienced, who knew how to do and come in with that job. Okay. And also, I feel sorry. His agent should have said, "Listen, Chelsea's not for you now. Perhaps 5 years, 10 years down the line,
but not now." Paddy, would you agree with that?
No, if I wouldn't, and I'm going to say something terribly cynical now. Andre Villas-Boas couldn't lose. I mean, it would have been a very brave financial decision not to take the job when it was offered. I mean, it's no good. You don't say to Roman Abramovich, you don't say, "No, not now, Roman. I'll come back in 3 years." You take it. If it doesn't work, you go and you take the money. And it sounds cynical, that, but you know, it is a lot of money. It's 9 million quid, and he can come again.
He's not going to end up with a big club. He's got that big thing against, because whenever it goes, somebody's going, he couldn't handle it at Chelsea, he couldn't handle the best players. He will get a job abroad or anything else. I'm prepared to say he will never work in the Premier League again.
You don't agree with that, do you?
Well, I mean, he's got a lot of time to prove you wrong.
He's going to be, it's always going to come back.
Yes,
you
it
know,
will.
You know, there's people suggesting that Roy Hodgson can't be the England manager because he didn't quite hack it at Liverpool. You know, again, I would suggest, if I'd have been advising Roy, don't go there. I'm sure Roy probably realised.
Don't go to Liverpool.
Go to Liverpool.
I would have said that too.
Stay at Fulham where you are.
But
I love that. I could listen to this for ages. But one second.
Sorry.
One second. I must have a quick word from our football supporter here. I'm coming back to you, Paddy.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think Chelsea have announced already that they're going to save a bit of time and money, and already announced that they've sacked the next manager. I think one of the lessons about this is that there's a lot to be said for stability, isn't there? That this constant changing. A lot of the most successful managers.
8 years. Eight managers in how many years is it now? 4 years?
Well, exactly, and
5 years.
It relates to the question we had earlier about Tevez and things. Is just who was and is running the show there. So
Paddy, you were about to say
I was just
something.
going to say, you're counting the managers since Jose left. I mean,
he walked out as well. He walked out of the contract, didn't he?
Jez probably has the same suspicion as I have, which is they've only had one manager. They're a model of stability. Because John Terry's been running the club ever since Jose left.
Jez, is that okay?
You have to ask the question,
laughing.
why did they let Carlo Ancelotti go? He won the double.
That was crazy. That was crazy.
I mean,
One second, David. Let me just bring
Jez
back.
about Carlo.
Do you agree with Paddy?
A poll on our website, so you know we're quite big, and 75% of Chelsea fans wanted Carlo to stay.
Yeah.
So that was the end of last season. And you've got to remember us as a fan group. You know, I'm old enough to have seen Chelsea relegated, so I'm happy to be where we are anyway. I've got the patience, so it's never the fans who are impatient. Maybe a few of the younger ones, but the older generation certainly not. And remember, we gave Ranieri a standing ovation after 4 trophyless years. So we're patient, but somewhere along the line in the club, there seems to be a very bad management issue, and I think regarding advising that you were saying, that would be it, because whoever's advising Roman needs his head examined, because consistently we're getting rid of top managers like Ancelotti and Mourinho. We're putting in managers that a lot of fans know can't cut it. So what we're saying now is, who's next? Because we can't imagine anybody.
That's what I want to ask.
The money getting it.
Yes, thanks for that. I want to ask Paddy, who's next?
Well, I mean, you could, Louis van Gaal is out of work. He could do that job. You know, there are lots of people, but I keep going back to Brendan Rodgers, who I thought hit the nail on the head.
But you, Dave, said he probably wouldn't be ready for that yet.
I don't think he's ready for it, and I think Brendan knows that. I think Brendan sees that he could see Chelsea coming for him.
And you've got Lambert at Norwich.
But I don't think. I don't
rising
think.
young stars.
Again, why does Paul Lambert want to go to Chelsea now? Because Chelsea's job is very difficult, because what that team is changing, and you've now got to get the world stars in and everything else and turn that into a team. So that Chelsea job is an extremely difficult job, believe me.
Who would you put in?
Why has Gus Hiddink not done it? You know.
Well, he did go for £8 million a year too.
Well, yeah, but why did Chelsea and everything else? I don't think managers are necessarily be falling over to go to Chelsea.
Who would you put in there, Dave?
I don't know. All I'd say is they've got to have an experienced manager, and I don't think Brendan Rodgers is experienced enough at the moment.
Jurgen Klopp from Borussia Dortmund, who's done marvellously well.
But again, we're talking about a different league, a different.
But he comes from a different culture.
Yeah.
and he would. I mean, he might make some money, but he'd become unhappy. It wouldn't. I mean, if as Harry says, I mean, he knows if no matter what money is on offer, the experience of Villas-Boas will make that quite unattractive.
I think you're right. A quick 10 seconds. Any thoughts about who should go into Chelsea?
No, I think it would be impertinent of me as not a Chelsea supporter.
It's
I'll let Jez and his mates say that, but I think
in private grief.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Jez, thank you very much. That was very stimulating. We've now got to go and earn a few more bob again, pay for us all, at least pay for the cabs home. Don't go away. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. And welcome back to the third part of the forum, and thank you very much for all the Skype calls and all the tweets we're getting loaded tonight. I'm in the company of Malcolm Clark, Dave Bassett, Patrick Barclay, and we have Ian from West Brom. Well, we're travelling the country now. We've just come back from Germany. We're in the Midlands. Ian, what's your question?
Hi, mate. I was just wondering, has the development of online journalism, including social media sites such as Twitter, been a good thing or a bad thing for football?
My children would say it's been the best thing ever, but let's ask the professionals. Actually, let's go to a football fan. What do you think about the tweets, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the online journalism, everything?
well, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, the reality is that these things are here to stay, aren't they? And we all have to adapt to it. We've been talking in the Football Supporters Federation about how we use Twitter, etc. I know that supporters find out instantly about where the Stoke City team is when they're in Europe because 2 or 3 of the players tweet about where they are. I don't tweet. You see, the trouble is I'm the wrong generation to learn this. But an online journalism is altering the thing. I think it's extraordinary. For example, you used to call a supporters meeting or have to go to a meeting to find out what was going on. And if it was a good meeting, you might get 30 or 40 people there. If I go on the Stoke City main message board, even after midnight, there's hundreds of people on it at that instant. And at times when there's a big news story...
Don't you find that rather good?
7 or 8. Well, it is because it gives you... If I want to communicate with Stoke supporters quickly, I can communicate with hundreds of them within a minute or two. In the middle of the evening, and it's just a totally different world from calling a supporters meeting and come. And so people no longer have to go to meetings to find out what's going on. As I say, the players will tell them. So we've all just got to learn to live with this new reality.
Now, I was watching the scenes at Tottenham the other day with my wife Janine, and we sat and we watched them, and then we had to go in the car and go home. And so we turned the radio on to get more news of what was happening. Janine was on Twitter, and the news was coming in faster on her Twitter than Radio 5 Live at the time, which is supposed to be out there. How's this affected you? You're in the front line. You're a journalist.
The problem is, yes, it comes in faster, but not necessarily more reliably. I mean, as was shown, during the riots, the speedy transmission of information isn't always constructive. During the case of, I'm not talking about the case of Patrice Muamba, where I think just every medium responded helpfully. And I'm very much in favour of fans exchanging information as quickly, as they want, as long as they don't call it journalism. Because journalism
but this is having an effect on your profession,
that anyone can do.
Because I know people want journalists to report, and I'm a huge fan of the media because I've lived with it most of my life. I'm getting less news from journalists. I'm getting more colour on the news from journalists these days. I look at the newspapers to get colour. I mean, I'm an avid reader of yours. I happen to know you and I respect what you do.
Thank you.
But I enjoy reading you, but I don't get my news from you.
No, you don't get the news from me, but what you get what you get from me and people like me is the product of a lot of thought. I mean, I'm not asking for sympathy, but it destroys I sit in the bath, or if I'm in the car, I'm thinking about football all the time because that's my job. You know, and I get paid for it. In the same way as a solicitor, you know, has to donate 8 years of his life to studying the law, or a nurse has to go to nursing college. You know, you have to prepare for your job, and it's simply not true that a man who, you know, an ordinary bloke in the street who has his work cut out raising his family and doing his own job should also be posturing as a footballing journalist. I mean, the fanzine movement was very helpful to journalism, because you had people doing what journalists doing and thinking about
inside the situation as well.
But when you have people firing off blogs and tweets and so on, that isn't journalism.
Okay,
it's
well,
just nowhere near.
Here's an example. Scott Forbes has tweeted us to say, online journalism has positives and negatives. It breeds impatience and hysteria. Speculation is far greater now than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of echoes what you're saying.
Yes, I agree with that.
How would you, Dave, handle, and it's a strange question to ask, I guess, because you were managing a couple of years ago, if your players were out there tweeting and they do cause problems, don't they? By doing what they do, they're talking very openly. The fans have never been closer to their players. But I guess my question to you is it a problem for a manager?
It is a problem because you'd have to bring in rules, and I'm sure clubs will do this, where you then insist that the player's not allowed to talk about any of his colleagues, what goes on at work, or anything to do with your club. Otherwise, you contravene and you're giving confidential information away, and you should be fined. So you do something.
So you would agree that fining people who speak wrongly on Twitter is
definitely.
If
you're being derogatory about your team or your club or the manager or the coach or anything else, that's not for that's you're doing. It's not like being critical of anybody at work. You know, if Patrick was you know working for the Evening Standard and he starts criticising the editor or something like that, that's completely out of order.
We've done that a few times.
Yeah, but I mean, and again,
would you agree with? You run a West Brom fan site, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Would you agree with what Dave and the panel have said?
Well, yes and no. Like I say, I run a fan site, WBA Mad, which is obviously an unofficial site, which is updated daily with news and features, polls, blogs, etc. We also have a message board on there where you know those sort of rumours, which Patrick discussed and mentioned, are started and probably spread. But at the same time, you know, I'm a trained journalist myself, so I'd like to think that maybe not all of the news on there wasn't based on rumour. So it's a tricky one from my aspect.
As far as you're concerned, is it good that news breaks on Twitter? Like we were hearing it when I was travelling home during the Tottenham game the other day.
I think it is. Yeah, I think what you've got to understand is that you know we live in such a fast-paced lifestyle now that the media has changed. So necessarily, where before we got our information from the daily newspaper or the radio, you know, now we're going on checking our mobile phones or going on message boards such as the one that I run, and the information's there within 10, 15, 30 seconds of it happening. So
well, I guess it's good if you're an insomniac football fan, because you can go on at 1 o'clock in the morning and still get a news feed. Ian, thank you very much indeed. Last word, Paddy, you're right in the heartbeat
well, I
of this.
think Ian and I really understand this. I mean, I didn't know that Ian was a journalist, but I mean, clearly he understands the difference between journalism and the standards that are imposed on you. And my word, we don't half fall from them. You don't need to. You'd have to have not watched the telly for several years to know that we don't fall from them. But at least standards are accepted. Whereas people chatting, that's fine. That's great.
So there's a dissemination.
And I think
there,
there's a
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to go for a quick 2-minute break. We look forward to joining you again, or hopefully you joining us again in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the forum. It's question time with Real Attitude. We're heading into the final straight, and I want to invite Alex to ask a question to the panel. Alex, what's your question, my friend?
Hi, guys. I just wanted to ask, in the 1980s, obviously there was the dramatic rise of the old Wimbledon side, rapidly progressing through the leagues. Do you think a similar feat's possible either from the current Wimbledon side or any other side in the modern era? Now finances play such a huge role in the beautiful game.
I guess we'll go to the man responsible.
It'd be very difficult. It's not impossible because teams can come through. Crawley looked like they could be on the march, 1 or 2 teams.
Do you really think Crawley can make that run?
I think it's like very unlikely.
And they've got money.
I think what happened when we did it, it was slightly different in that the finances were reasonable, but it was a different situation. Whereas I think we would have struggled to hang on to some of the players that we had. People kept on coming because we played long ball. People thought that people like Winterburn, Brian Gow, Andy Thorne, Dave Bassett, Alan Cork, Laurie Sanchez, Glyn Hodges, Dennis Wise weren't very good players, but they then proved that they could.
As a unit, though, you made that work.
Yeah, they're all good footballers. They could play long ball, they could play short ball. It didn't matter. They could play to the system that you wanted. They were intelligent players. They were competitive, so they knew what the job was. Their job was to win football matches, and they did that very successfully and took the club from the 4th division to 6th in the Premier League or the top league in my first season.
It does seem to be a much harder challenge these days. I mean, you look at someone like Brighton, who I think have had an outstanding season under Gus this year, but you wouldn't say they're ready for the Premier League, would you?
No, probably not. I think that listening to Harry and listening to him reel off those names, not only do you realise the point he made about the finance being released to keep them there above maybe the crowd figure, but also it's not you need the other ingredient, which is you need a decent youth. I mean, their youth production was excellent.
Well, I mean, we got through that team that got us through the last few. Kevin Gage of the youth team, Brian Gow the youth team, Andy Thorne the youth team, Nigel Winterburn 3, Hodges the youth team, Wally Downs the youth team. Vinnie Jones cost a couple of bob, 10 grand. Sanchez cost 29 grand.
And they all travelled well.
And Alan Cork and Andy Sayer. Well, Alan Cork was a free transfer and Andy Sayer. So you're talking that Wimbledon, out of that, there were 6 or 7 from the youth team.
A club would have to have all of
this. This is a dream, isn't it, Mark? I mean, for a football fan, to see that happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Is an iconic moment or 3, isn't it?
I mean, Swansea have taken 6 years to get from League 2 to the Premier League, and let's remember that Swansea were a club that were saved by their supporters through the Supporters Trust, and in fact are now a Premier League club with, I think it's a 25% holding, owned by the supporters. So Swansea is a tremendous story that in some ways is not too
well, Wigan did it as well, didn't
dissimilar.
Yeah.
Wigan did it largely through external money.
Yeah, but I mean, you compare Swansea's crowds compared with Wimbledon. Wimbledon was 2,300, and in those days, and 3,000 there. Swansea get 18,000. So even when we was in the Premier League, the top division that first year, our average gate was just about 8,000 people. So so when you're doing it, the funds are there. It's not impossible, but I would say it's very, very difficult.
Taking Dave's point, is there a glass ceiling? Can you get it, Alex? Can you go through, I don't know, conference, Div 2, Div 1, maybe get into Championship, but could you really not make it all the way to the Premier League because of the finances these days?
Well, I mean, I think plenty of sides have shown that if you have a good run of form in the Championship, on any given season, a team can get promoted. I think it's interesting. We've mentioned a couple of teams that have gone up and progressed through the leagues. You mentioned Wigan, but I don't think any of the sides that have sort of shot up in quite quick progression have ever like winning the Premier League. I mean, I think it's possible. I mean, I got a bit optimistic as a Wimbledon fan. I think it's possible that we could one day make it up there again. But I think there's a big difference in class between the bottom and the sort of a good Championship side that can push for promotion to the Prem and a Premier League winning side. So I think there's kind of a glass ceiling there. But I mean, because as we've seen in the Premier League, there's not many teams out there that can win it. But so I think we can get up there. I just don't.
Well, it's been an interesting question, and I'm delighted that we've had Dave with us to answer it. Final word, Dave. Is it possible?
Yeah, well, dreams can come true. Fairy stories don't.
Well, there you go. And there's been a few fairy stories as well. We've got another question coming in from a guy called Terry in Sheffield. No, we've got a couple of issues there, so we'll go to a quick break and then we'll have Terry for you in a couple of minutes. quick cup of tea. Come back. And welcome back to the forum for the last part of tonight's programme. Before we toddle off to bed and you switch over and go and watch the other question time, we'd like to take a question, one last question tonight for our panel, from a gentleman called Terry in Sheffield. You're a Sheffield Wednesday fan, I believe.
I am, yes.
That's 2 Sheffield calls we've had tonight. Anyway, you're very welcome. What would you like to ask the question? What would you like to ask the panel?
Well, with the state of the England setup at the minute, the FA seem to be taking their time on appointing a new manager ahead of the major tournament in the summer. Do you think that this could be a problem in relation to when it gets to this summer, that we haven't got a manager? Do you think it's, putting pressure on the players and such like?
It's a very interesting question. I'm going to come to Paddy because so many people in the game think that the media choose the next England manager in any event. So,
well,
who's the next England manager?
Well, I can assure
should he be
you
appointed
that
now?
If I can assure you and Terry that if I had anything to do with it, it would have been handled in a completely different way from the way it's been handled. It should have been done within minutes of the decision being taken, not the following day, not even that evening, that same afternoon, as before Capello's car had hit the North Circular. They should have made an approach to Tottenham Hotspur, assuming that they wanted Harry Redknapp. They should have sorted it out by the end of that day, because the tournament, and Terry's probably just one of millions of England football supporters who are concerned that it could be embarrassing in the summer when at the European Championships, and I would say even beyond then, because if, let's say, I mean, it's obvious that Stuart Pearce will have to play a major role in this championship while preparing for the Olympic Games. This is the biggest mess imaginable.
But so the indecision is making it worse.
The indecision, the FA's indecision is final. I don't know what.
Although they will argue that they're trying to be non-interruptive to the English game.
Well, Tottenham Hotspur's results would argue otherwise.
I would say you're probably right.
And I'd say Harry Redknapp's body language would suggest that what he needs and Tottenham need is certainty. Now, if it had been done that very afternoon, and if the choice had been Harry Redknapp, it could then have been decided, right, you will come, as soon as the season's over, you will come with us to Ukraine or Poland. They haven't even decided
where they're going.
Made a very clear decision on that. But that's not the FA's fault, because Capello was in charge then. And then, by the end of that day, the day that Capello left, Harry would be clear. He would be the manager charged with getting Tottenham at that time to be third or even first in the league.
Okay.
And it should have been all done then.
Harry Bassett, you're Harry Redknapp. How are you feeling at the moment? You don't know whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday. Or you just got to get on with your job?
Yeah, you've got to get on with the job. You can't use that as an excuse that Tottenham's formed because you're being linked. The press
Would that be affecting him then? Will that be affecting him?
It shouldn't be affecting him, in my opinion. You know, I know Harry, and it shouldn't be affecting anybody. Harry he doesn't know definitely he's going to get the job, because everybody, supporters and most of everybody, the media are saying that Harry's the job. The FA have decided that they're not going to do it till the end of the season. So you've got to get on with it. You know, you can't be there. What about anybody? You know, you
but the supporters around are all assuming that he's going to go.
If you use that as an excuse, so as a Tottenham fan, you're thinking,
is that not creating an atmosphere though? Because the Tottenham supporters all think that he's going.
Well, he might go, he might not go. What happens if he don't go? What's Daniel Levy do? Does Daniel Levy offer Harry a contract, or does he say, hold on a minute, I'm not offering Harry a contract, or whatever? You don't know where it comes. For me, I disagree.
So it's causing
with that. Listen, the England team, my wife can pick 6 of the England players, your wife and anybody else. Joe Hart, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, Wayne Rooney, Steven Gerrard. There's 6. Now it's finding the other 4 to get together.
Yeah, but
The England manager, it doesn't matter. You can take over at the end of the season because you're there. All of a sudden, Harry can't all of a sudden decide I'll buy, Modric from Croatia or Bale from Wales to come and play for England. Well, you know who the England players are.
Wait a minute.
Who's
your wife going to play in the defensive midfield role? Has she sorted this out with Lampard and Gerrard yet?
No, she can pick 6 of the players. She can pick 6 of them, can't she? Who's going to be in the team?
But it's how they play. You're a Spurs fan for the next minute. Are you concerned? Do you want this resolved?
Well, I'm sure that the Spurs fans are probably a bit concerned, and their attitude will probably vary whether they're keen England supporters or not, because quite a lot of supporters are not necessarily that interested in the national team. I mean, I think I take a slightly different view from Paddy, really. I think that the important thing is that they get the decision right for the long-term interests of the game. And obviously, I have no idea what's going on. But what I do think is that you can't have an appointment like this made by media clamour. And let's judge it. But
Terry's not the media. Terry is a spectator, a fan of Sheffield Wednesday in England, and he thinks it's I'm putting words in his mouth.
Gentlemen, we're very close. We're very close to the end of time. I'm going to give you a very quick. Dave,
I think the FA might be wait and see. Is Mourinho going to stay at Real Madrid? Does Arsene Wenger perhaps want to be the England manager at the end of the season? There's some other bits and pieces that are very interesting to find out.
Okay. Last but one word is yours, Terry.
I just think it needs sorting out pretty quickly.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask the panel members, who do you think should be the next England manager?
I honestly think it should be Harry, but we need to know sooner rather than later.
Thank you. What do you think, Malcolm?
A purely personal view, I actually would like to see Roy Hodgson, but whether most of our members think that is probably much more doubtful.
Is that because you have a sort of Midlands leaning with the Stoke?
Well, no, not particularly. I think he's got the international experience that could be useful. That's just a personal view. It's not.
Dave,
you've got to find the right manager from the interviews, and there's all different aspects. So I'm not prepared to say because I think there's viable candidates out there. Harry Redknapp's viable, Roy Hodgson, and there's others.
I think you're right about that.
I've been arguing for Roy Hodgson for 15 years, but basically anyone English.
Patrick has had the last word. Patrick Barclay, Dave Bassett, Malcolm Clark, thank you all very much for your work, your endeavour, your thoughts, your opinions, and all the knowledge that you've brought tonight.
Thank you.
For all of you that have joined us, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll join us again next week or the week after. In the meanwhile, sweet dreams, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Good night.
Stay ahead of the game with Sports Tonight Live. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Sports Tonight Live on Facebook and like our fan page. Follow Sports Tonight TV on Twitter and tweet us your thoughts and opinions. Sports Tonight Live, it's the platform for the fans.
How do I feel?
Yeah, 4th. Does that matter at the moment?
Yeah, no. After the points that we were ahead, back I think it was 13 points at the end of January. I'm obviously disappointed that we're now behind Arsenal.
It's going to be a very exciting running between you and Arsenal. Anyway, let's have your question to the 3 wise men I've got sitting with me.
Good evening, fellas. Yeah, my question basically is, after Saturday's events at White Hart Lane with Fabrice, all fans got the Spurs fans and Bolton fans got great press by the way that they behaved at the ground. Do you now think that around all grounds, that behaviour between different supporters will improve? Respect to each other's and also to the players that are playing on the pitch.
Malcolm, you're the supporter spokesman tonight.
Yeah, well, obviously Saturday's event was an extremely unusual one, as well as obviously an extremely serious one, and I would imagine that many of the supporters there feared that they were seeing an event that was much more serious than it eventually, thankfully, turned out to be. Fortunately, it is very rare, but in my experience, even with slightly less serious events, when players are carried off on the stretcher, normally both sides applaud as well. So I think we're in danger slightly of over-exaggerating the problem. The behaviour generally in football grounds is far, far better than it was 20 years ago anyway. So.
Paddy, you've followed it for years and years, and you've seen the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, that is fair to say, and I've seen some of the most hideous episodes in the game. It was nothing to do with behaviour, but Hillsborough, and of course we all, either in person or in through television, saw Hazel and so on. I mean, and Malcolm's quite right to say that by and large, when something serious takes place, football fans respond. Even before the misfortune that befell Fabrice Muamba, and thank God, now appears to be he now appears to be over the worst.
Yeah.
Some of the accounts are really quite encouraging over the last 36 hours. But even before that, there was the tragic, completely unconnected case of Gary Speed, and I thought that the way the football family as a whole, when Sepp Blatter uses the phrase the football family, you tend to sort of smile sardonically.
Do you feel part of the football family?
I have done, I did.
It's Thursday, it's 8 o'clock, and you're at the Forum. The next 1.5 hours we're going to sit and discuss and debate the hot topics of the last 7 days. Do please keep in contact with us. It's a kind of question time with sporting attitude. So on the screen you'll see how to contact us by Skype, Twitter, at Sports Tonight TV. And I have 3 wise men with me tonight. They didn't come bearing gifts, but they do come loaded with opinion. Malcolm Clark, from the chair of the Football Supporters Federation. You're very welcome. Tell me, you are chair, but you also have a chair or a seat at the table, which I believe is the FA Council. That's the first time a football supporter's ever had that, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm the supporters rep on the FA Council, but that makes me one of 118, so it's actually quite a big table.
I remember they taught me at business school, a quorum of more than 7 is difficult to get a decision. How do you get a decision out of 118 people around a table? Presumably they're not all around a table at the same time.
Well, sometimes we have problems, but all I can do is make sure that the supporters' voice is heard, and I try to do that to the best of my ability. So Charlie Sale in the Daily Mail constantly describes me as making long-winded rants.
Well, you've got 90
minutes. I think our members would be quite happy to know I'm doing that.
You've got a good platform for 90 minutes to rant away tonight.
Excellent, yes.
The inimitable Dave Bassett, I've known you for a very long time. Now, I've got to try and get this right because I Wikipedia'd you last night. Barnsley, Watford, Southampton, Sheffield United, Leeds United. I'm missing a couple.
Leicester, Nottingham Forest, Wimbledon and Watford.
More clubs than Tiger Woods.
That's right.
Lots to say. Well, I know you've got lots to say because I've seen you with lots to say over the years, and I know the audience are going to be very appreciative of your views tonight.
Thank you.
So you're very welcome. And Patrick Barclay, now of the Evening Standard. Now, I know you're one of the wise men because I've known you since God was a little boy. And formerly of the Times,
yes.
Independent.
Yeah, Independent.
Way back.
Telegraph, Guardian, and Guardian. Probably when we first met, I was on the Guardian. I've been kicked out of more jobs than Harry's been engaged in.
But you've also been very opinionated on a number of issues and led the front in the sports world. So I know you're going to enjoy this tonight. We have a question coming in from a gentleman called Simeon. Simeon, hello. Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Good evening.
You're a Spurs fan, Simeon?
I am a Spurs fan.
Okay, how do you feel?
I was very proud to be part of football when I saw the response at some of Gary Speed's former clubs when his widow went there, for example, and his 2 boys and his father. And it must have been very, at a time when they needed all the help they could get. Football fans went to quite ingenious lengths, like having the 11 minutes of applause after 11 minutes of the match because that was Gary's number. I mean, things like that I thought were resourceful and really helpful. And I think that what happened over Fabrice Muamba may have, was
Do you
very
think
much...
it's because we're a slightly more caring society than we were in the early days when you and I first entered the professional world of football in the 80s?
I don't know about that because there is the other side as well. There are the odious chants about Manchester United and so on, which must be balanced against it. But by and large, I think that recently...
I want to pick that up, by the way, with you, Dave, because Paddy says about odious chants. Now, you've stood in the dugout, you've been intrinsically involved in the game, and you must hear things. And we always, as supporters, people always wonder, does that matter? Does he react to that? Does he hear that? Or are you so focused on the game? Do you hear some of the stuff that goes on from the crowd when you're managing?
You don't. I didn't personally, you know, because you were concentrating on what you were doing. I mean, there would be the odd chant that you'd hear, but quite honestly, you sort of close your ears to it because it's insignificant to you at that moment. You know, you can't change anything, and you sort of accept when you go away from home, the away fans, the home fans are going to be aggressive and behind their team. They're going to shout for every foul, every handball's in their favour, you know, because that is the way they are. They become biased, and all fans are like that. They see through one eyes that their team is there, and that was come. So I think when we go back to it, to they actually play, you're not going to find that the football family is going to be together. There's still going to be the players, the fans still crying and shouting out if the ref gives a free kick against them that they don't think, and etc. I think there's going to be that competition. But of course, when something comes that's, you know, seriously happens like this, then people common sense kicks in somewhere along the line. You come along, you can't sort of be stupid then. You realise that we're all pulling together and this is something different, you know. But I think when it comes to the team, that if you're a fan of one club, you're with that club. You want them to win. You don't mind how they win.
But you have an empathy with the opposition supporters in a situation like this, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, yes, yeah.
Simeon, is that how you feel? I mean, you were there on Saturday, weren't you? Simeon, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
For you, you're still a fan, I presume. Do you still watch it? As I know you're involved and you see it and you have to professionally commentate on it these days, and sometimes you manage teams through the years. Do you see football still as a fan, and do you behave like a fan still after all these years?
I don't really behave like a fan. Occasionally, you know, I might get a bit carried away when I'm watching a game and sort of, you know, go into a mode. I see something happens, but I'm a football fan. I enjoy watching football. I enjoy watching good games. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of bad games as well, but as a fan, you have to put up with those. You're not going to see all the great games. If you end up, in my opinion, if you've got to support a team through the season and you see 5 or 6 really great games by your team, then be grateful, because you'll then see probably 5 or 6 good performances. Then you'll see some bang average, and then you'll see some very poor performances by your team, and even with the standards that are met. So I actually enjoy football. I enjoy seeing the game. I enjoy the people that are in it, and I think football people come from they're different from rugby people. They're different from other sports people, and every sport has got the type of fan that follows them that are different. They would say they're from football, and I think, you know, people have got this football where, you know, I can understand with fans, you know, that they're with their club, and I think it's tremendous when you've got small clubs, you know, in League Two, your Torquays, your Rochdales, and teams like that. Well, Rochdale League One,
lower league football, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and even
the wealth
non-league,
of emotion from the supporters.
You know, they go with their team, you know, and I think that's
Well,
fantastic, because the easiest thing in this day and age would be, I'll be a Man City fan, I'll be a Man United, I'll be a Arsenal, I'll be a Chelsea, I'll be a Tottenham. It's easy to jump on the bandwagon, and I can understand some people do that because they want the corporate and everything else.
All I can say about this, and I've got a little bit of insight into this, because journalists constantly get accused of being biased, and we get sort of stick. The unhappy fans, the ones who moan, who accuse you of, I mean, I'm biased towards Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, everybody. I'm biased towards everybody, apparently. And the most sort of vicious diatribes all come from fans of big clubs. Now, I support Dundee, a tiny little club, and I'm happy all the time, win, lose or draw. And I feel genuinely sorry for people who support big clubs, because they're never happy.
We should keep this going, but I'm looking at you because there's so much more I want to say. We will get back to it. Right. We have to cut to a commercial break. We've got to earn a little bit of money for the station. So, quick cup of tea. See you in a couple of minutes. You were there on Saturday?
Yeah.
How did you feel being part of that?
I'm proud now of the way that we all behaved, and obviously absolutely delighted that he's pulled through, and amazed at the response from the medical staff. And even yesterday at the Stoke game, I thought Tottenham and Stoke and all round the grounds, everybody did the football family proud by acknowledging and wishing him well in the way.
Did you feel slightly jaded at the start of the game yesterday?
Yeah. I think it was quite a weird atmosphere going to the game. I wasn't totally sure if maybe it was a bit too soon, but I understand the club felt it was the right decision.
I think you would have a bottleneck of fixtures otherwise.
And yeah, no, it did feel a bit weird.
So when you take that back with you, Malcolm, as you, I know, discuss supporters' issues with the FA, that must presumably make you feel very gallant when you sit around that big table.
Well, yes. I mean, I think at the end of the day, football supporters are human beings. A lot of what goes on in the football ground is theatre, really, to be honest.
But you get 30,000 people in one arena in any walk of life, and let alone the emotional tribalism that exists in football. That's one hell of a commonality of emotion.
Yeah, the difficult thing is to try and reach agreement about when the line is crossed, and that's quite difficult. You know, you had reference earlier to chants about Hillsborough, chants about Munich, and I think 95% of people would say that's when the line is crossed. But nevertheless, some people still do engage in that.
Pick up on Hillsborough for a second. There are players that were born in the Liverpool area who still today won't pick up a copy of the Sun newspaper because of that. Yeah. As a journalist, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's a very complicated issue, that one. But
you've got at least 30 seconds on it.
All right, there are a lot of. Let me just broaden it. There are a lot of things that, as a journalist, that I find that I'm ashamed of, and I think there are quite a few things that have happened over the years that, as a football fan, that I'm ashamed of. But Hillsborough, I can't discuss that in 30 seconds.
It was just, for me, I was just curious. It's such an emotion, and it's lasted, obviously, for a very long time.
Yeah, understand.
Dave, you've been involved in football at all different levels.